Due to the celebratory nature of this video, I did not really edit it for language like I do for most of my videos, so viewer discretion is advised. Also, stay tuned after the main part of this video where I will talk about upcoming projects and some video ideas that we are working on. For New Year's 2018 into 19, I decided to take another trip out to Ohio. While Ryan and Kayla had come out to the East Coast to come to shows like Carlisle and Ocean City's famous H2OI, I had not been back to visit them in their home state since June, when I went to Super Summit. Since I left straight from work for my trip, I decided to stop off where some of my friends were staying in West Virginia. Not only would this help break up the drive into multiple segments, but I'd also get to disconnect from society for about a day while hanging with my friends out in the mountains. They have a really cool off-grid camping setup that utilizes shipping containers for shelters. I currently don't have that much footage of the campsite, but it's located on an absolutely beautiful mountainside. At some point, this place will probably be featured in a future video. But for now, it was time to get back on the road for Ohio. When I originally planned this trip out, I knew that the total trip distance would be longer than if I just went straight to Ohio. See, while I live in Maryland and I drove through Virginia to get to West Virginia, Maryland has a very unusual shape up in the western part of the state. So I actually ended up going from West Virginia back into Maryland, back into West Virginia, and then into Pennsylvania before getting to Ohio. And despite being able to cross Maryland and its more populated areas in about an hour, hour and a half from north to south or south to north, going from east to west, it takes significantly longer to cross the state. I believe from the eastern shore all the way out to western Maryland, it could take as many as 6 hours to completely cross the state. And because parts of Maryland out west are as little as a mile wide between West Virginia and Pennsylvania, you may end up crossing through multiple states within a short period of time before you actually get away from Maryland. In fact, when I crossed from West Virginia back into Maryland, I think I spent roughly another hour in Maryland before crossing back into West Virginia. I stopped off just over the Ohio border for gas, which, by the way, I was incredibly surprised by how cheap gas is out in Ohio and even in Virginia, which is not too far away from where I live. Filling up your car's tank for less than $20 is unheard of in Maryland in the DC area. So I was really excited to see those low numbers and know that on my return trip I would only be paying about $1.75, $1.76 for gas to fill a 10-gallon tank, which would get me back home. I got in kind of late on an overcast evening, so we didn't really do much that night, but the following day it was really nice out, so, we couldn't resist. We had to go start up the Shadow and see how well it would start after sitting for a few months, and sure enough, it fired right up, and I promise I'm going to make a video about this car in the future. I've been really meaning to edit that together and talk about Ryan's build here and showcase it as best I can, and actually, I guess procrastination has paid off at this point because he's done a few more things to the car since then. So that should make for a very fun video. I might see him before I even finish the video, so there's going to be a lot of content on that car. So one of the places that I went to on my road trip around the country back in 2009 was the Cleveland Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And since that was almost 10 years ago, I thought it would be cool to come back and see the changes that had occurred over the last decade or so with pop culture and the exhibits. And initially I remembered the first few parts and I was like, well, this hasn't changed much. And then we got to some of the new exhibits like the pinball exhibit, and I was like, okay, this was not here before. And there was obviously some artists that had risen to fame since 2009 that were really fun to read about. So they're always changing exhibits here. If you've been there before and it's been a while, I definitely recommend going back. We had a lot of fun playing the pinball games. They give you 2 tokens for free, and that gives you about 4 games each, depending on the machine you pick. They did allow videography and photography, and I probably could show more of this museum, but it's just a really cool experience. If you're in Cleveland, I I encourage you to check it out for yourself. I don't want to ruin the fun and take a shaky video of all these exhibits, because there's a lot of cool stuff, lots of outfits, guitars, memorabilia from bands from today and bands of the past. Another thing I don't remember in 2009 was the Sirius XM Channel 26 radio studio. They broadcast right up in that top floor of that building, which is really cool. You can actually walk up, you can see the DJs, you can pick up the headphones and listen to them. So that was really cool to see them in person with the the radio sound effects and all that stuff. Another thing that I did not realize is that museum goers actually have a say in who they induct. They still go through like a panel of judges, which is how I always imagined it, but they pick from a selection of artists that the visitors of the museum choose. So you actually go in there, you type in an artist, it'll tell you if they're eligible or not. They have to have released their first album at least 25 years ago, so at the time of this recording, that would have been 1993. It's kind of hard to think of anything right off the top of my head, but one of my friends was like, oh look, Jimmy Eat World is eligible. They started putting stuff out in the 90s. So I was like, oh, that's a great idea. So we all submitted Jimmy Eat World as our vote. So then they have a monitor next to that with the most recent 5 suggestions for nominees. And then next to that, a monitor with the top 100 nominees that people have submitted. I'm going to assume over the course of the year, I don't know if it resets or not, but I'm going to guess those are for 2020, if not just overall top 100 nominees of all time that have yet to be inducted. And then, of course, afterwards, we had to get funneled through into the gift shop. That's usually how they get you. They route you in a way that you can't avoid it. But I actually wanted to get a t-shirt anyway. It had been 10 years, almost 10 years, since I had been here last, and the t-shirt I got in 2009, while I still wear it, starting to get holes in it from welding and working on cars. So I thought I'd get one with the 2019 nominees on it, but unfortunately they only had 2018s, but that was still really cool. I was able to get a t-shirt with some of my favorite bands on it. After going through the museum, we decided to go back to Ryan and Kayla's house and wait for Dominic and Brianne. They're part of the Dodge Shadow group I talked about in the Integra episode 4 video. And they actually appear with their Dodge Shadow in the H2OI 2018 video. When they showed up, I think we went drinking. I gotta look that up. That's a segment of the video that I do not have ready right now. The following day was the last day in 2018, New Year's Eve. The early afternoon became more of an errand running kind of day for the celebrations that would happen later that evening. But it would not be an Ohio trip without a trip to Summit Racing, where we played the game Who Could Spend the Least Amount of Money. I'm pretty sure I came in last place, but I needed some parts for a future project that we're working on this channel. Shortly after the Summit trip, it was time to celebrate New Year's. I know a lot of people like to go to bars or places like New York's Times Square to celebrate New Year's, but sometimes it's a lot more fun to just stay in with friends and play board games or video games. The drinks are also a lot cheaper. I guess we should play Fortnite one last time while it's still relevant. I'm sure 2019 will bring some new gaming trend to replace this game. By the way, I was also today years old when I realized Fortnite was cross-platform compatible, especially between mobile and console or PC. This is crazy. He's gonna pop the ceremonial. With seconds left before the new year, it was time to open the champagne. But it kind of did that for us.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! Cheers, you filthy fucking animals! Hey, dude, that was rude as hell.
After a while, things started to wind down, and everyone started to go to bed. This was definitely one of my favorite New Year's celebrations.
There we go.
That cat is epic.
So our original plan was to all go to a nearby drag strip for the so-called Hangover Nationals. However, we all agreed that we're probably going to sleep in and miss it, and that's exactly what we did. and instead we went to BD's Mongolian Grill in a neighboring city. Now, BD's is kind of a franchise. We used to have them in Maryland, but they have all since closed down to the best of my knowledge. I haven't been able to find one in Maryland, but this one in Ohio has seemed to survive. I'm not sure how many are left nationwide, but it seems like the numbers are shrinking, since Google Maps indicates that all of the Maryland locations are now permanently closed. After lunch, it was time to start getting in the mindset to say our goodbyes. I wanted to stay longer, but I had work the following day. And ideally, I wanted to get the Integra over the Appalachians well before midnight in case I ran into any issues. And sometime later, I was on my hometown's highway and back home safely. I was already looking forward to the next trip to Ohio, but that will have to wait for another day. So, with 2018 over, you're probably wondering what's in store for this channel next, especially since we only posted a handful of videos in 2018. Well, so far we've mainly been posting about the Integra project, and that's been taking up a lot of our time. However, I have been coming up with some ideas for 2019 on what we're going to post. Obviously, we will continue posting about the Integra, but I also have another project car that has been kind of in the works for about 4 years now, but I haven't made any content about it until now. Mainly because most of the modifications to the car have been cosmetic and not performance oriented, and while cosmetic stuff's really cool, those kind of modifications alone don't tend to make as interesting a story as a high performance build. And by high performance, I mean better than what came on the vehicle, not necessarily race worthy. Now, I will be touching on the cosmetic stuff that I've done to this car. I've documented it very well over the past 4 years or so. I've video recorded a lot of the modifications that have been done, but I haven't really done a structured video on what I did or why. I have a couple compilations on my old channel. For some reason, the older, more outdated one has been getting more views than the newer, more better edited one with better footage and better modifications. Gotta love the sacred YouTube algorithms, but if you want to watch those, they're on my old channel. I'll link them in the description. They're alright, they're kind of more a compilation than explaining what's going on and why, but I will use that footage in future videos to explain what I did and how I did it and why I did it, along with these performance modifications that will be going in as well. I also want to put this on the record. I officially challenge Fuzzy Dice Projects to a race with his V8 swapped S10 Blazer. If you haven't seen his channel, be sure to go and check it out. He has some really awesome videos on his builds. He has a S10, a Silverado, a Trans Am, and now I think they have a couple other cars, as well as some other stuff. He's got some firearm stuff, and then some backyard projects, like I think they built a smoker out of a 55-gallon drum or something like that. So definitely go check out his channel if you haven't seen it yet. We also have some video that has not been edited from 2018. I went to Carlisle Chrysler Nationals. I have a lot of video content from that. I can't really put it in a linear story because there's a lot of time lapses and pictures and walking around. So I'm going to do as best I can with that to explain what happens at Carlisle, what it's like for first-time goers, what you can expect to see there, what to bring, stuff like that. Attractions nearby, we kind of explored the surrounding areas. Really beautiful, unforgettable experience. Great time with friends. If you have friends that go to Carlisle, definitely try and tag along. You won't be disappointed. So I also have a lot more footage from H2OI 2018. As you may know, it's one of the biggest car shows on the East Coast, probably the biggest unofficial car show on the East Coast, if not the entire United States. Those that follow the current day car scene will know that this is like car meet mecca. It's just absolute lawlessness. Everyone with a car comes, stays in the city, basically takes the entire city over. Large crowds form along Coastal Highway to watch cars and encourage people to do burnouts. And while I don't condone any illegal behavior on this channel, I'm not going to say I don't laugh and get a good kick out of an awesome burnout. It's great people watching too. Obviously people are breaking laws, people get arrested, but as long as you're just watching and observing and don't bring an unsafe car, you're probably not going to have a problem. I've also bought a few new tools towards the end of the 2018 year, so I'm probably going to do some videos showcasing those tools, maybe talk about what I like and dislike about each tool, why someone would need these tools, what the costs are, stuff like that. And then of course weekend road trips to new places. And I've been bad about making content on that kind of stuff. It's kind of hard to do that just because if you're walking around with a camera, people kind of give you funny looks. But there's a lot of attractions on the East Coast and even out west. Obviously I can't go out west that often because that takes time and money, and I don't have that right now. But I'd like to take more trips to surrounding areas that I've never been to or really explored before. And then I'd also like to do videos about things you should know for road trips or things you should know about the interstate system, stuff like that. More informational videos with more graphics and stuff like that to explain those kinds of things. I'd also like to do some videos on my F-150 and my Dodge Shadow. I've done a lot of modifications to the F-150. I got a ham radio in there, I got some lights. I'd kind of like to explain what I did with the wiring, why I did what I did, and then on the Shadow, I might be doing some work on that. I might change out the automatic transmission for a manual unit, but that hasn't been decided yet. I still don't have any parts for that, but I might do some other stuff on it. I got some new parts for it. Might do some videos on how to buff a car, stuff like that. The car has a lot of uses for video content that I haven't created yet. But yeah, I think that's about it. That's a lot of ideas there. And of course, I'd like to hear from my viewers. I know at this point, we're still a relatively small channel at the time of making this video. We have less than 100 subscribers. I highly doubt that number is going to go above 100 before I upload this. But I'd like to hear what you guys think of the content. Be sure to engage. It really helps us tailor our content to your liking, and it helps us come up with new ideas for future content. And one last thing, if you have a cool car, project car, I'd love to review it on this channel. I know earlier in this video I said I'm going to finish the video on Ryan's Dodge Shadow, all his modifications, stuff like that. I didn't go into too much detail on the car itself. I kind of explained what he did, but I didn't show as much of the car as I wanted to, and thus that's why I decided I can make another video on that car and really showcase it. But I'd love to do that with other cars, so if you have a really weird car, unusual build, or a classic or an exotic car, I'd love to feature it on this channel, talk about it, tell your story, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think that's a wrap, so Happy New Year, and as always, thanks for watching.